Welcome to the DragonLance Saga Gaming Advanced Dungeons & Dragons episode. This is the 5th episode in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide series. It is Linara's new cult. Is it Linara's? I'm not sure of the day, but I do know it's new cult the 15th. My name's Adam. Dragonlance came out of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, so I thought it'd be fun to read the core rules aloud and discuss them with anyone who happens to want to listen. Alternatively, this can be seen as your Saturday morning nap time reading, because I've been known to put people to sleep. That being said, I'd like to take a moment and thank the members of this channel and invite you to consider becoming a member. You can also pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using my affiliate link. Both links are in the description below. You know what's weird? I didn't brush my teeth, and that doesn't matter to all of you because this isn't smell-o-vision or anything, but I can taste that my teeth are not brushed. And it's not pleasant. And this is totally the wrong title. I don't know why that's there. What is... No. Come on now. Hold on. Just bear with me. There we go. There we go. That's right. We're in the adventure section. So let's begin. Travel in the known planes of existence. Hold on. Let me mark down my time here. The known planes of existence, as depicted in Appendix 4 of the player's handbook, offer nearly endless possibilities for advanced Dungeons & Dragons play, although some of these new realms will no longer be fantasy as found in Swords and Sorcery or myth, but verge on that of science fiction, horror, or just about anything else desired. How so? The known planes are a part of the multiverse. In the prime material plane are countless suns, planets, galaxies, universes. So too there are endless parallel worlds. What then of the outer planes? Certainly they can be differently populated, if not substantially different in form. Spells, magic devices, artifacts, and relics are known ways to travel to the planes. You can add machines or creatures, which will also allow such travel. As far as the universe around your campaign world goes, who is to say that it's not possible to mount a rock and fly into the moon? Or perhaps to another planet? Again, are the stars actually suns at a distance, or are they the tiny lights of some vast dome? The hows and wherefores are yours to handle, but more important is what is on the other end of the route. For those of you who haven't really thought about it, the so-called planes are your ticket to creativity, and I mean that with a capital C. Everything can be absolutely different, save for those common denominators necessary to the existence of the player characters coming to the plane. Movement and scale can be different. So can combat and morale. Creatures can have more or different abilities. As long as the player characters can somehow relate to it all, then it will work. This is not to say that you're expected to actually make each and every plane a totally new experience, an impossibly tall order. It does mean that you can put your imagination to work on devising a single, extraordinary plane. For the rest, simply use Advanced Dungeons & Dragons with minor quirks, petty differences, and so forth. If your players wish to spend most of their time visiting other planes, and this could come to pass after a year or more of play, then you will be hard-pressed unless you rely upon other game systems to fill the gaps. Herein I have recommended that Boot Hill and Gamma World be used in campaigns. There is also Metamorphosis Alpha, Tactics, and all sorts of other offerings which can be converted to man-for-man role-playing scenarios. While, as of this particular writer, there are no commercially available other plane modules, I am certain that there will be soon. It is simply too big an opportunity to pass up, and the need is great. Astral and ethereal travel are not difficult, as the systems for encounters and the chances for the hazards of the psychic wind and ether cyclone are but brief sections of Appendix C random monster encounters, easily and quickly handled. Other forms of travel, the risk and hazards thereof, you must handle as you see fit. For instance, suppose that you decide that there is a breathable atmosphere which extends from the Earth to the Moon, and that any winged steed capable of flying fast and far can carry its rider to that orb. Furthermore, once beyond its normal limits of Earth's atmosphere, gravity and resistance are such that speed increases dramatically, and the whole journey will take but a few days. You must then decide what will be encountered during the course of the trip, perhaps a few new creatures in addition to the standard ones which you deem likely to be between Earth and Moon. Then comes what conditions will be like upon Luna, and what will be found there, why, and so on. Perhaps here is where you place the gateways to yet other worlds. In short, you devise the whole schema just as you did the campaign, beginning from the dungeon and environs outward into the broad world. In this case, the universe, and then the multiverse. You need do no more than your participants desire, however. If your players are quite satisfied with the normal campaign setting, with occasional side trips to the layers of the abyss or whatever, then there's no need to do more than make sketchy plans for the eventuality that their interests will expand. In short, the planes are there to offer whatever is needed to the campaign. Use them as you will. All right, let me see something really quick as I'm making notes. Outdoor movement. As the scale of maps will differ from campaign to campaign, general movement rates are given, and you can adopt them to the scale of your campaign maps accordingly. Some variation in movement rate is justifiable, but the distances shown should neither be increased or decreased substantially. So I want to show you guys this really quick. So we have movement afoot in miles per day. The burden is light, average, or heavy, and the normal movement rate. Terrain is rugged and then very rugged. And then movement mounted in miles per day. What type of mount? Normal, rugged, and very rugged. Light burden assumes an average man walking with no more than 25 pounds of additional weight in food, weapons, and other equipment. Average burden assumes an average man traveling from 26 to 60 pounds of gear of all sorts. Heavy burden assumes an average man with more than 60 pounds of gear, but less than 90 pounds. Adjust all weight assumptions by strength and race factors. Normal terrain assumes basically open ground, scrub, typical desert, light forests, low hills, small water courses, etc. With respect to vehicular movement, it assumes roadways through such terrain or small fields, steppes, plains, etc. Rugged terrain assumes rough ground, snow, forests, steep hills, large water courses, etc. With respect to vehicular movement, it assumes either roadways through such terrain or tracks or paths through normal terrain. Very rugged terrain assumes broken ground, deep snow and ice, heavy forests, marshy ground, bogs, bluffs, mountains, and broad watercourses. Note, you must determine for yourself which terrain areas are impassable to mounted movement or any normal travel. Generally, large swamps and high mountains fall into this category. And we have movement afloat, oared, or sculled in miles per day, and the vessel type for water travel, and whether it's in lake, marsh, river, sea, or stream. And then movement afloat, sailed in miles per day. The vessel type, lake, marsh, river, sea, or stream. See below for effects of current on movement. Lake assumes a large body of water at least 2 to 3 miles broad and several times as long minimum. Marsh assumes a shallow body of water overgrown with aquatic vegetation but with considerable open channels. This does not include a bog but does include swamps. River assumes a body of water at least 3 times as wide as the vessel afloat upon it is long. That is, the smallest river is at least 40 feet wide and navigable to the vessel considered, usually because of familiarity and or piloting. For current effect, subtract its speed times 8, c times 8, for movement when moving upriver, adding the same factor to movement for downriver traffic unless navigational hazards disallow, in which case adjust to a multiplier of 2 or 4 times current accordingly. Sea and ocean. Movement assumes generally favorable conditions. It is not possible to herein chart ocean currents, prevailing winds, calms, or storms, for these factors are peculiar to each milieu. Currents will move vessels along their route at their speed, Prevailing winds will add or subtract from movement somewhat, 10 to 30%, depending on direction of travel as compared to winds. Calms will slow sailed movement to virtually nil. Storms will have a likelihood of destroying vessels according to the strength of the storm and the type and size of the vessel. To simulate these effects during long voyages, reduce the movement rates shown by a variable of 5% to 20%, d4, 1 equals 5%, 2 equals 10%, etc. Stream assumes a body of water under 40 feet width. The effects of currents are the same as for river movement. For description of vessel types, see Waterborne Adventures. Oh yeah, we got an image here. Gotta show you these images. This was like a big thing when I was a kid. You have like either a black board and you're using a white charcoal piece or white pen, or you're actually etching black off of a white board to reveal the white underneath. All right, pretty cool. Infravision and Ultravision. Why is this an adventure? That's kind of strange, but okay. Infravision. As explained in the player's handbook, infravision is the ability to see light waves in the infrared spectrum. Characters and various creatures with infravisual capability out of 60 feet standard are basically picking up radiation from their surroundings. Therefore, they note differences in thermal radiation, hot or cold. They do not see things which are the same temperature as their surroundings. Thus, a room in a dungeon might look completely blank as walls, floor, ceiling, and possibly even some wooden furniture within are all the same temperature. Openings in the walls should show up rather plainly, as space anywhere else will, and if you are generous, you can allow different substances to radiate differently, even if at the same temperature, i.e. the wood in the example above would be discernible if care was used in scanning the room infravisually. Note that air currents might show us cold or warm layers, except where very warm or very cold objects are concerned. Vision of this sort is roughly equal to human norm on a dark and cloudy night at best. Note also that monsters of a very cold or very warm sort, such as a human, can be tracked infravisually by their footprints. Such tracking must occur within 2 rounds of their passing, or the temperature differences where they had trodden will dissipate. I've never considered the idea of air currents and infravision. That adds a really interesting visual descriptive play to the game. That's kind of cool. Light sources which give off heat also absolutely prevent normal infravision from functioning within the sphere of illumination. Explain this as the effect of trying to see in the dark when the observer is in a brightly lit area. It requires no less than 2 segments to accustom the eyes to infravision after use of normal vision. Creatures with infravisual capability of unusual nature, such as those which see infravisually at 90 feet, are actually emitting infrared radiation from their eyes and seeing what is within this visual range by receiving the reflected radiation. Such creatures can easily distinguish floor, ceiling, wall, and other areas, as well as furnishings within an area. The eyes of all such creatures will appear as very brightly glowing red when observed by any other creature with standard infravision. Most monsters inhabiting underground areas will have this form of infravision. Infravision outdoors enables the individual to see figures which are warm or cold at 100 feet to 300 feet, depending on temperature extremes. Vision is otherwise equal to a bright, starry night with full moonlight. Ultravision. Ultravision is the ability to see radiation above violet in the normal visible spectrum. Unless this ability is of highly unusual nature, so as to be able to see far into this spectrum, ultravision will not be useful underground, where radiation is screened out. Without some source of ultravisual emanation, magic weapons which shed illumination and spoil ultravisual capability, just as heat does infravision. As noted in the player's handbook, ultravision enables the viewer to see outdoors at night as if he or she were in twilight, so vision extends clearly for about 100 yards, dimly to about 300. On particularly cloudy nights, ultravisual capability is reduced to about half normal, i.e. clear sight to 50 yards, dim to 150 yards. Invisibility. Now I'll sneak up on the monster invisibly. How often has this cry rung forth from eager players in your campaign? How often have you cursed because of it? Never fear. There are many answers to the problem of invisibility, and most difficulties will be resolved after you read the following rules and suggestions regarding the subject. Invisibility is not what most players desire it to be. It is neither a soundproofing nor an odor preventative. Normal sounds issues from the invisible creatures, just as normal odors do. Monsters might well be able to hear, smell, or see the invisible character. Furthermore, the associates of the invisible party are not able to see him or her any better than foes are, so this can cause problems too. Now consider a silence spell and large area invisibility cast upon a party. Imagine the chaos within the area as characters stub their toes on the heels of the same person before them, with the inability to hear anything, so that footfalls, suggestions as to what should be done, or orders cannot be heard. Consider also that dust on the floor will betray most invisibility, as will dust or powder in the air. Think of a door opening without any visible cause. Will this cause suspicion in the mind of the viewer, particularly when the surroundings are taken into account? You bet it will. Invisibility spells are broken when attack occurs, but what about devices? Becoming invisible takes but a twinkling, but if the party is observed doing so, there's no reason why any opponent cannot attack where the standard penalty -4 for inability to see the target. Likewise, becoming visible takes only a second, but thereafter the foe is able to clearly observe the attacker for a return of the compliment, as it must be assumed that it requires a full round to again activate the magic which enables the character to be non-visible. Invisibility to animals. The first level druid spell does not allow attack, but it is pretty well proof against stupid animals. Invisibility devices generally duplicate the spell or else make the user likely to be undetected that turn or round, indetectability being stated as a percentage chance. Check each period as applicable under the situation. Dust of disappearance does not negate sound or odor either, so it is basically the same as an invisibility spell which allows invisible attack. Psionic invisibility is a mind control ability, the Shadow Knows, which is more similar to the druidic invisibility to animals, for the affected creatures do not notice sounds or odors from the psychic. Note, however, that this form of invisibility is sharply limited in that it works only on a set maximum number of creatures according to their combined levels or hit dice. In no event is the thief ability to hide in shadows to be treated the same as the invisibility as regards disappearance. See character classes, thief abilities for further details. Hey, Skull Cowboy, thanks for joining live, man. That was rough, going through those spells. Finally, we have the consideration of the ability to detect invisible creatures even though they are not actually seen. This is explainable as the observer's ability to note a minor disturbance in the air, a shimmering or haze, or by keen hearing and or keen sense of smell. The table below gives the probability of detection of invisibility according to level per hit dice. Let's check this out. So depending on your level or hit dice of the creature trying to detect you or them, and their invisibility rating, you have a percentage chance. Oh, wow. So a very intelligent 17 plus character with 15 levels or more has a 95% chance of seeing all invisible people. Good luck sneaking up on a lich. They're just going to look right at you. Like, what are you doing? Like, if your smell wasn't bad enough, and that's coming from a lich, I'm looking right at you. Note, you may give unintelligent creatures with keen hearing or sense of smell the equivalent of intelligence to reflect detection of invisible creatures. Check each round the creature is exposed to invisibility. Once detected, the invisible creature will be kept track of thereafter, as the detector will be able to note the cause. Any attacks incur the -4 penalty of attacking an invisible opponent, of course, and the invisible creature likewise is entitled to a +4 on saving throws. Mirrors. It is important for dungeon masters to remember that in order to be reflective, a mirror must have a light source. Detection of evil and/or good. It is important to make a distinction between character alignment and some powerful force of evil or good when this detection function is considered. In general, only a no alignment spell will determine the evil or good a character holds within. It must be a great evil or a strong good to be detected. Characters who are very strongly aligned, do not stray from their faith, and who are of relatively high level, at least 8th level or higher, might radiate evil or good if they are intent upon appropriate actions. Powerful monsters such as demons, devils, Krynn, and the like will send forth emanations of their evil or good. Aligned undead must radiate evil, for it is this power and negative force which enables them to continue existing. Note that none of these emanations are noticeable without magical detection. In like fashion, powerful magic items which have some purpose as respects alignment will radiate evil or good, unless they are aligned with neutrality, which is neither, of course. Most other magic items will most certainly not, even though their effect might be for good or evil. Likewise, items which are not magical, but which might have powerful effects, will probably not give any evil or good aura. Poison is a prime example. It is a perfectly neutral and has no aura whatsoever. Unholy water will emanate evil, just as holy water will radiate good. Places sanctified to some deity or evil or good will certainly give off an appropriate aura. That's what the Dungeon Master's Guide is saying. I mean, it all goes to intent, right? So it's your own personal philosophy or morality as the base, and your intent of action is what causes that to be good or evil. So I don't know. I would say it's your intent and your desired action that is going to be the thing that determines good or evil, not just your morality code or your philosophy. Thus, a trap, for example, is neutral and gives no evil or good reading. If the same trap leads victims to the lair of Jubilix, for example, there will be an aura of evil about it, while if it brings victims to the realm of Bahamut, it will send out an aura of good. Using these guidelines, you should have little difficulty in adjudicating the attempts of characters empowered to detect evil or good to do so. As a side note, be sure to remember that all such detection requires not less than one round of stillness and concentration, whether the power is from inner source, paladins for example, or by some external means, spells, swords, etc. Therefore, the character must stop, have quiet, and intently seek to detect the aura. Listening at doors. In addition to the simple exercise of observation, many times characters will desire to listen, ear pressed to a portal prior to opening and entering. This requires a special check in secret by you to determine if any sound is heard. Because of this, continual listening becomes a great bother to the DM. While ear seekers will tend to discourage some, most players will insist on having their character listen at doors at every pretense. First, make certain that you explain to players that all headgear must be removed in order to listen. Those wearing helmets will probably have to remove a mail coif and padded cap as well. Don't forget. The party must also be absolutely silent, and listening will take at least one round. Silent creatures, undead, bugbears, etc., will never be heard. Sleeping or resting or alerted creatures will not be heard either. If there is something for any listener to hear behind the door, the following probabilities will determine if any sound is heard. So let's take a look at this. The race of the listener and the chance of hearing the noise. I mean, it's pretty low, 10 to 20%. Keen-eared individuals will gain a bonus of 1 or 2 in 20, 5% or 10%. Use chance of hearing a noise to determine if a character is keen-eared the first time he or she listens at a door, and if it is indicated, tell the player to note the fact for his or her character. Player characters who not initially have hearing problems, as they wouldn't have survived if they had them. During the course of adventuring, great noise might cause hearing loss. Handle this as you see fit. A loss of hearing might negate the chance to hear something behind a door without any other noticeable effects. Hearing noise. When a die roll indicates a noise has been heard, tell the player whose character was listening that he or she heard a clink, footstep, murmuring voices, slithering, laughing, or whatever is appropriate. Of course, some of these noises will be magical, e.g. audible glamour spells. Not everything will be encountered at all. Be imprecise and give only vague hints. Never say, "You hear ogres," but "You hear rumbling, voice-like sounds." Failure to hear any noise can be due to the fact that nothing which will make noise is beyond the portal, or it might be due to a bad, for the listener, die roll. Always roll the die, even if you know nothing can be heard. Always appear disinterested, regardless of the situation. I love these little Dungeon Master tips because it's easy for a Dungeon Master to sort of show his hand, his or her hand, because they get excited. They want the players to, face adversity and hopefully come out on the other side okay. But part of the experience is not knowing what's behind the door. So if you tip your hand, then they know to plan ahead and to be ready. If in this particular case, there is something behind the door, but they don't hear it, and you don't show that there is visually, then they're going to walk through the door like there's no big deal. They're going to be caught by surprise, or they're going to walk into, a dragon den, or, anything. A den of snakes. Part of the fun is the surprise of the moment, and really leaning into that is important for Dungeon Masters. Because let's be honest, even if a player says, you can tell me, I'll just role play it this way or that way, that rarely, if ever, works out. Yes, people are capable of role-playing ignorance, but no, most people don't. Maximum number of listeners. Each listener will take up about 2.5 feet of space, so up to 3 can listen at a typical dungeon door. Maximum length of time for listening. Only 3 attempts can be made before the strain becomes too great. After the 3rd attempt, the listeners must cease such activity for at least 5 rounds before returning to listening again. All right, we move to our next section. This is one I know y'all are going to love. Combat. That's right, Mace. Thanks for joining live. Encounters, combat, and initiative. Combat is divided into 1-minute period melee rounds, or simply rounds. In order to have reasonably manageable combat, manageable applies both to the actions of the combatants and to the actual refereeing of such melees. It would be no great task to devise an elaborate set of rules for highly complex individual combats with rounds of but a few seconds length. It is not in the best interest of an adventure game, however, to delve too deeply into cut and thrust, parry and riposte. The location of a hit or wound, the sort of damage done, sprains, breaks, and dislocations are not the stuff of heroic fantasy. The reasons for this are manifold. As has been detailed, hit points are not actually a measure of physical damage, by and large, as far as characters and some other creatures as well are concerned. Therefore, the location of hits and the type of damage caused are not germane to them. While this is not true with respect to most monsters, it is neither necessary nor particularly useful. Lest some purist immediately object, consider the many charts and tables necessary to handle this sort of detail. And then think about how area effect spells would work. In like manner, consider all of the nasty things which force adventurers as the rules stand. Are crippling disabilities and yet more ways to meet instant death desirable in an open-ended episodic game where participants seek to identify with lovingly detailed and developed player character persona? Not likely. Certain death is an undesirable as a giveaway campaign. Combat is a common pursuit in the vast majority of adventures, and the participants in the campaign deserve a chance to exercise intelligent choice during such confrontations. As hit points dwindle, they can opt to break off the encounter and attempt to flee. With complex combat systems which stress so-called realism and feature hit locations, special damage, and so on, either this option is severely limited or the rules are highly slanted towards favoring the player characters at the expense of the opponents. Such rules as double damage and critical hits must cut both ways, in which case the life expectancy of a player character will be shortened considerably, or the monsters are being grossly misrepresented and unfairly treated by the system. I am certain you can think of many other such rules. 1-minute rounds are devised to offer the maximum of choice with a minimum of complication. This allows the DM and the players the best of both worlds. The system assumes much activity during the course of each round. Envision, if you will, a fencing, boxing, or karate match. During the course of 1 minute of such competition, there are numerous attacks, which are unsuccessful, feints, maneuvering, and so forth. During a 1-minute melee round, many attacks are made, but some are mere feints, while some are blocked or parried. One, or possibly several, have the chance to actually score damage. For such chances, the dice are rolled, and if the 2-hit number is equaled or exceeded, the attack was successful. But otherwise, it too was avoided, blocked, parried, or whatever. Damage scored to characters or certain monsters is actually not substantially physical, a mere nick or scratch until the last handful of hit points are considered. It is a matter of wearing away the endurance, the luck, the magical protections. With respect to most monsters, such damage is in fact more physically sustained, although as with adjustments in armor class rating for speed and agility, there are also similar additions in hit points. So, while a round of combat is not a continuous series of attacks, it is neither just a single blow and counterblow affair. The opponents spar and move, seek the opportunity to engage while an opening in an enemy's guard presents itself. I really love, just sort of stepping away from the text here for a second, I love that explanation because ultimately they're trying to distill furious, instantaneous combat into a turn-based system. And there's never going to be a chance where it's just like hit, block, hit, block, hit. You know, you're constantly going to be moving around and trying to find an opening in your enemy's defenses and stuff. So in order to simplify it, it just makes perfect sense to sort of break it down in this way, I think. I did play with a lot of friends who were very specific about where you were hit and whether that affects your ability to move or attack or defend. And that gets so cumbersome and frustrating, even though it is really cool when you lop someone's head off or their limb or something. It's not cool when you have to keep track of all those tiny little dings and damages and effects. It just bogs play down. Because of the relatively long period of time represented by the round...
Sorry, could you say that?
All right, Siri, leave me alone. Because of the relatively long period of time represented by the round, dexterity, agility, speed, quickness, is represented by a more favorable armor class rating rather than as a factor in which opponents strike the first blow. Likewise, length and relative speed factors are not usually a consideration. See initiative and charging below, however. The system of advanced Dungeons & Dragons combat maximizes the sense of hand-to-hand combat and the life-and-death character of melee without undue complication. Because of this, you, the Dungeon Master, are enabled to conduct such portions of a game without endless resort to charts, tables, procedure, clarifications, and over-lengthy time requirements. Players, on the other hand, will not become bored with endless dice rolling and rules consulting, but at the same time will have a reasonable chance to seek escape for their characters should the affair go badly. The steps for encounter and combat are as follows. 1. Determine if either or both parties are surprised. This is something that I really want to stress because it's very rarely, in my personal anecdotal experience, it's rarely ever a situation where you're both surprised. But that is always a chance. You know, if you're wandering around a corner in a canyon or if you're walking into a room, the chance of you knowing something is around that corner in the room or the bad guys knowing that you're going to turn that corner or enter the room is slim to none unless they're actively paying attention. So you could very well both be surprised. And I think that's a situation that is an exciting experience. And it opens the opportunity for a little bit of a sense of realism in the encounter. 2. Determine distance, if unknown, between the parties. 3. If both parties are unsurprised or equally surprised, determine initiative for that round. 4. Determine the results of whatever actions are decided upon by the party with initiative. A. Avoid engagement, flee, slam door, use magic to escape, etc. if possible. B. Attempt to parley. C. Await action by other party. D. Discharge missiles or magical device attacks or cast spells or turn undead. E. Close to strike range or charge. F. Set weapons against possible opponents. Charge. G. Strike blows with weapons or to kill or subdue. H. Grapple or hold. 5. Determine the result of whatever actions are decided upon by the party which lost the initiative as per A through H above. 6. Continue each melee round by determination of distance, initiative, and action unless melee ends due to fleeing, inability to continue, or death of one or both parties. Surprise. The term surprise is basically self-explanatory. A surprised party is caught unawares or unprepared. In such circumstances, the non-surprised or less surprised party has an immediate advantage, which is reflected in the granting of one or more segments of initiative during which the active non or less surprised party can take actions. 4. A through H, wholly or partially depending on several modifying factors. The surprise segment is 6 seconds. Avoiding, parlaying, awaiting the action of the surprised, missile discharge and setting of weapons, typically spears or spearing type of polearms, are possible. Most spells cannot be cast in a single segment, although first-level magic user illusionist spells are usually but 1 segment long, as are some other spells, and these spells are possible to use in a surprise segment. Other, longer casting time spells can only be begun in the first segment of surprise. Similarly, the distance separating the parties may be too great to close during a single segment. Even by charging, and melee striking or grappling might not be possible. However, during the surprise segment or segments, the surprised party is unable to react in any way, so the latter actions might be possible. A great example of this is in the Book of Boba Fett, the last... Oh, you know what? I don't want to do any surprises. Never mind. Just in case people haven't seen it yet. Surprise is determined by rolling a 6-sided die for each party concerned, modifying the result by using the most favorable member of the party concerned, i.e., a ranger surprised only on a roll of 1 will represent the whole of a group of other character types. Note, however, the effect of dexterity as detailed below. The same holds for mixed types of monsters. If surprise is indicated for both parties concerned, the party which has lesser surprise subtracts its result from the result of the greater to find the number of segments the latter are inactive. I want to say that again. If surprise is indicated for both parties concerned, the party which has lesser surprise subtracts its result from the results of the greater to find the number of segments the latter are inactive. That's pretty cool. Nonetheless, it is possible for both parties to be surprised equally, with surprise thus having no effect. Surprise is usually expressed as a 2 in 6 chance for all parties concerned, i.e., a 6-sided die is rolled with a 1 or 2 indicating surprise. Some monsters are more capable of surprising foes than the normal 2 in 6 probability, and some cannot be surprised as easily, so they have a reduced probability, 1 in 6, 1 in 8, etc. Each 1 of surprise equals 1 segment. 6 segments of time lost to the surprise party, and during the lost time, the surprising party can freely act to escape or attack or whatever. If both parties are surprised, then the effect is negated or reduced. So let's look at this little chart here. So surprise, dice difference, and lost segments. So if there's a difference of 1, 2, or 3, and it gives you the die roll in parentheses, then you lose the segments of 1, 2, or 3. And of course, we know that each segment is 6 seconds of time. I think there's like, yeah, there's 10 segments in a round in a minute. Assume the party of characters comes up upon a monster. They have a 2 of 6 chances to surprise, and the monster also has 2 and 6. A 6-sided die is rolled for the party, another for the monster. Both sides could be surprised, or either could be surprised. This is shown on the table below. All right. We got to work this out here. So the party's die roll 3 to 6, and the monster is 3 to 6, then no one is surprised. So the party is rolling for their own surprise. The party's die is a 1, and the monster's die is a 1, they're both surprised. If the party's die is a 1 or 2, but the monster's 3 or 6, then the party is surprised. So yeah, rolling for yourself rather than the monster. Interesting. So example, party A is surprised on a roll of 1 or 2, while party B is surprised only on a roll of 1. A rolls 2 and B rolls 1, so A is inactive due to surprise for 1 segment. Had B rolled a 2, it would not have been surprise at all, and A would have been inactive for 2 segments. Example, party A is surprised only on a roll of 1, but party B surprises on a 5 and 6, a d6 1 through 5. Due to its nature or the particular set of circumstances which the DM has noted are applicable to the encounter. The favorable factor normally accrued to party A is 1, i.e., parties of this sort are normally surprised on 1 or 2, but this party is surprised only on a 1. Therefore, they have an additional 1 and 6 to their favor, and not a 50% better chance. Party B will surprise them on a 5 or 6 less 1 in 6, or 4 and 6. Assume A rolls a 4, so it is surprised for 4 segments unless B rolls a 1, in which case A's party inactive period will be only 3 segments. Or if B rolls a 2, in which case surprise will last for only 2 segments. 4 minus 1 equals 3, or 4 minus 2 equals 2, because it's the difference between the 2 rolls. I actually think they make it more difficult in their examples than just explaining the rule. But that's just me. Because the party surprised is relatively inactive, the surprising party will be able to attempt telling blows during each segment of surprise as if the segment were an entire round. That is, a fighter able to attack twice during a normal combat round will be able to do so twice during each surprise segment. So dice are rolled for a hit determination accordingly. Even if distance prevents striking with weapons, the discharge of arrows, bolts, or hand-hurled weapons is possible at 3 times the normal rate, providing the weapon missiles are ready. Otherwise, at normal rates for rounds. Once surprise segments are over, melee proceeds normally on a round-by-round basis. Prior detection negates the possibility of surprise, thus magical devices can possibly negate surprise by detection of thoughts or intentions. Noise can negate surprise considerations, whether the sound is the normal progress of the party or the effect of a fruitless attempt to open a door. Light can spoil the chance of surprise. The particular condition of a monster can likewise negate any chance of it being surprised. In any event, it is of utmost importance to realize that surprise can be and often is unilateral. That is, one party can be surprised while the other, somehow aware of the other's presence, cannot be so taken. In all such cases, melee roll for the party which is subject to the condition and do not roll for the other. The surprise left me surprised. Dexterity reaction in surprise. This factor, Dexterity Table 1 Player's Handbook, affects both surprise and mutual surprise situations. In the former case, the penalty -3 to -1, or bonus +1 to +3, allows the surprised party on an individual basis only the opportunity to mitigate the condition. That is, if there is a dexterity penalty, the individual will suffer that many additional segments of time in a surprised state. On the other hand, if the dexterity bonus applies to the individual negates that many segments of surprise as far as the individual only is concerned. Dexterity reaction bonus for surprise never creates surprise in an opponent party or in an individual with regard to its penalty factor. It adds to existing surprise or detracts from it, and only as far as the particular individual is concerned, not for any other individuals concerned. As Dungeon Master, you will undoubtedly decide that there are situations where penalty and or bonuses do not apply, such as when an individual is otherwise prepared or when the individual is in the act of pulling chainmail over his head. Such adjudication is properly within the scope of refereeing the game, and you should feel free to deny either case as you see fit. Factors contributing to surprise. When one side or another is surprised, this general term can represent a number of possible circumstances. In the first place, it simply represents actual surprise. That is, the opponent was unprepared for the appearance or attack. The reason for this could be eating, sleeping, waste elimination, attention elsewhere, not weapon ready, etc. Okay, waste elimination. When have you ever told the dungeon master, you're like, all right, I'm going to go poop around this bush over here? Has that ever come up in your game? I've never once said, hey, I got to take a leak. Hey, party, hold up. Let me just go relieve myself and eliminate my waste. Not once. While each possible cause of surprise could be detailed with a matrix and factors of time for recovery from the condition calculated to a nicety, the overall result would not materially add to the game. In fact, the undue complication would detract from the smooth flow of play. The second factor represents a surprise is morale. What is the effect of being taken unaware and or unprepared upon the surprised party? Reactions are not only hampered by circumstance of a physical nature. Panic or fear reactions to the situation take their toll. Again, this is all subsumed in the single surprise roll determination for each side and in the simple set of rules governing what transpires when one or the other is surprised. I think a great example of this is you just waiting around a corner and someone walks out in front of you and you just jump out and yell boo or something. They are clearly surprised. Fear has taken over if they react in most cases, and they just, it's a fight or flight reaction that is triggered in their brain. Again, be careful, because I have tried to surprise people and they just strike out to hit you without even thinking about it. So, buyer beware. All right. Finally, the surprising group must be able to assess the situation and act upon it. So, surprise doesn't mean that the party with the advantage has automatically achieved victory and triumph. What is gained is the opportunity to act as is seen best in the circumstance, be it to flee the encounter, get the drop on the surprised, or to attack with spells, missiles, or blows. Of course, the other side is then forced to react in whatever the surprising side has chosen to do. Distance. When an encounter occurs, the distance between concerned parties will be 5 inches to 10 inches, d6 plus 4, subject to the following modifying factors. 1. Line of sight. If this is unobstructed and light is involved, the distance possible for determination of another party present is virtually infinite. It could likewise be sharply restricted due to obstructions. 2. Noise. If one party is making considerable noise, which is discernible by the other party, the latter will have the options of fleeing or concealment, the former negating the encounter, the latter allowing distance to be 1 inch to 4 inch before discovery by the noisy party. 3. Actual area. If the encountered party is in a small area, distance between the two can be no greater than the maximum distance possible for discovery of the one by the other, i.e., opening a door to a 20-foot by 20-foot room, which means the distance between the two parties can be under 10 feet by 10 feet, or thereabouts, or 20 feet. D6, 1 to 2 equals striking distance, 3 to 4 equals 10-foot distance, 5 or 6 equals 20-foot distance. 4. Planned or unplanned appearance. The sudden precipitation of one party upon the other due to any number of factors, teleportation, dimension door spell, other magical means, a shoot, etc., will cause distance similar to that found when the actual area is a factor. 5. Surprise. Surprise can only be a factor in close encounter situations. If either or both parties are surprised, the distance must be either 1 inch to 3 inch, or it must be less as determined under the actual area modifier. Thus, if the actual area were a 40-foot by 60-foot room, if surprise exists, the distance between the parties will be 1 inch to 3 inch. 6. Light. The illumination factor or visual capability of the concerned parties will affect encounter distance as follows. A light source reliance limits the encounter distance to twice the normal vision radius of the source, 2 times radius of the light source. B. Infravision and or Ultravision operate only to the stored limit of their range and limit encounter distance accordingly. Initiative. Surprise gives initiative to the non- or less surprised party. It is otherwise determined when an encounter occurs and at the start of each combat round. It indicates which of the two parties will act or react. Again, a d6 is rolled and the scores for the two parties are compared. It is recommended that such initiative rolls be made openly, unless there is some reason to hide that of the encountered monster party, such as a special bonus which would be unknown to player characters involved. The higher of the two rolls is said to possess the initiative for that melee round. While it is not accurate to roll one die for all individuals comprising each party, it is a convenient and necessary expedient. Separate rolls could be made for each member of two small groups, for instance, but what happens to this simple brief determination if one party consists of 9 characters and 6 henchmen, and the other of 7 giants and 19 direwolves, let us say? Possession of initiative allows the individuals to take action or reaction as desired according to the foregoing list of alternatives, and as detailed hereafter. The dexterity or speed of individuals or weapons is not considered in the 1-minute round, except as hereafter noted. So I got a question for you guys. When you roll initiative, are you rolling in your own games? Are you rolling for each character and then one for the monster party? Because that's typically how I've seen it done in different games, and I think that's kind of BS. If you're going to roll initiative for every individual hero, you should roll initiative for every individual monster. And this rule system is to simplify that effect. Just saying, look, no, the hero party has initiative or the monster party has initiative. Let's figure out what happens then. And then you just choose the order amongst yourselves. And usually, you can use your marching order as that guide. Like, well, I'm in front, so I seem first, so I do the first thing. Or, maybe you just have it set up. But we have to remember that rounds are not A to B to C. It's the totality of everything happening in that 1 minute. So, oh, you do it for each. Hey, Derek, how you doing, man? So if a wizard is the third person to go, that first segment they're acting in is still the first segment of the round, not the first segment of their turn in the round. So if we think of it as a totality rather than a one goes, then another goes, and another goes within the context of the round, it doesn't really matter who goes first because you're all acting at the same time within the round. Does that make sense? Initiative for creatures with multiple attack routines. When one or more creatures involved in combat are permitted to use their attack routines twice or more often during the round, then the following initiative determinants are employed. When the attack routine may be used twice, then allow the side with the advantage to attack first and last with those members of its group who have this advantage. If it is possessed by both parties, the initiative roll determines which group strikes first and third, which group strikes second and last. If one or both groups have members allowed only one attack routine, it will always fall in the middle of other attacks. The order determined by dicing for initiative when necessary. If one party has the ability to employ its attack routines thrice, then the other party dices for initiative to see if it or the multi-routine group strikes first in the midpoint of the round. Extrapolate for routines which occur 4 or more times in a round by following the method above. Note that a routine is the attack or attacks usual to the creature concerned, i.e. a weapon or weapons for a character, a claw bite routine for a bear, with incidental damage assessed as it occurs, the hug, for example. A 12th level fighter is allowed attack routines twice in every odd-numbered melee round, for example, and this moves up to 3 per round if a haste spell is cast upon the fighter. Damage from successful attacks is assessed when the 2-hit score is made and damage determined, the creature so taking damage having to survive it in order to follow its attack routine. I think this is really important because if we're to believe that each round is attacking at the exact same moment, and your fighter, who in this particular round has 2 attacks, is attacking the exact same monster that, let's say, your cleric is attacking, and with those 2 attacks, he would kill the monster, well, then the cleric just lost their turn because they were going to attack that creature. However, conversely, if the fighter attacks at the very beginning of the round, and then everyone who only has 1 attack then attacks, then the cleric could kill that monster. So, it would mean that the fighter could then choose potentially a different target for his second attack. But again, that all comes down to however much of a stickler you are as a DM for the players in declared actions. Ties. It will often occur that initiative determined results in a tie. This merely indicates that each party has equal chances for acting and that attacks occur simultaneously. In cases of equal initiative score, damage accrues on both groups regardless of what is inflicted. Inflicting damage. Except as noted under ties above, damage or the general results of some attack routines, such as a turning of undead or casting a slow spell, is inflicted upon the reacting party prior to allowing these creatures their portion of action in the melee round. Thus, some of the members of the party, which does not have the initiative, might be caught in a web spell. Others might be turned by a cleric, and some damaged or killed, destroyed by other spells, missile discharge and blows from handheld weapons before they have a chance to themselves attack. The reacting party's action could be an attempt to flee, cast spells, hurl missiles, or melee. It does not matter. If the reacting party does use attack routines, for example, the damage so inflicted will be assessed immediately. This could well mean that if they win the initiative roll next round, they can attack a second time, doing damage accordingly, because the opponent party can act. Encounter reactions. Any intelligent creature which can be conversed with will react in some way to the character that is speaking. Reaction is determined by rolling percentile dice, adjusting the score for charisma and applicable loyalty adjustments as if the creature were a henchman of the character speaking, and the modified score of the percentile dice is compared to the table below. So let's look at this table together. Adjusted dice score and the reaction. I actually like this a lot because it's making the statement that just because the creature is considered a monster does not mean the creature is violent. I mean, you may run across a bugbear that just happens to really love elves for whatever reason. Maybe it's one of those old fairy tales where an elf pulled a thorn out of its paw, and so it just has a favorable reaction to elves from that moment on. I like that complexity in monster psychology rather than just, well, it's an evil creature, so it always is going to attack you and it's always going to kill you, thereby justifying for heroes, if I see a goblin, I will always attack to kill. It's not always the reaction you should have. It just creates an overly simplistic world in which you're living in. Dragonlance, for example, is a wonderfully complex world in relation to individual creatures. The whole Huma-Kaz dynamic would not exist if Huma reacted to Minotaurs simply by saying it's a race that follows an evil god, hence the race must be filled with evil people, hence I'm not going to rescue Kaz from the goblins, and then Kaz is killed. That would be horrible. So instead, there's complexity of individual experience that you have to consider. And this role just justifies that. Avoiding. It is always possible to flee from an undesired confrontation if the other party is surprised. It is never possible to flee from encounter when the opponent party is in striking range. See breaking off from melee below. A party can always flee an encounter if it gains the first initiative. Whether or not the opponent party will follow in pursuit of the fleeing party depends on the following factors. 1. What you, the Dungeon Master, have stated in all your key concerning the party, if applicable. This is first and foremost in all cases. 2. What the stated characteristics of the creatures involved are. That is, if player characters do they say they will pursue, or if monsters do their descriptions say that they will always seek to pursue? 3. Obvious deterrents to pursuit, such as a pool of flaming oil, a secured portal, etc., will modify monster behavior accordingly. 4. Fleeing party behavior and or possessions noted by the opponent party will modify pursuit desire. 5. Relative speed will cause the pursuing party to cease fruitless chase if they are obviously being outdistanced, except if the pursuers are player characters who must state that they are halting such chase. 6. Otherwise, 50% of the time, d6 1 to 3 equals pursuit, 4 to 6 equals break off pursuit. You have a biased friendly reaction to elves, yeah. You have an unbiased friendly reaction to, actually you have a biased unfriendly reaction to Anakin Skywalker for cutting your arm off. Parlaying. Upon encountering another party, the party with initiative can always elect to attempt some form of communication. This can be a friendly gesture, a throwing down of arms, offering of treasure, or some spoken word or phrase. Just what this effect will be is determinable only by the DM considering the prevailing circumstances. It is safe to say that a group of elves attempting to parlay with a red dragon will find their efforts generally unsuccessful unless they also have some obvious advantage which the dragon is aware of. It is common for player characters to attack first, parlay afterwards. It is recommended that you devise encounters which penalize such action so as to encourage parlaying attempts, which will usually be fruitless, of course. Awaiting action. This is self-explanatory, not an attempt to parlay, but neither an attack. It is seldom utilized by experienced adventurers. Missile discharge. This is the usual loosing of arrows and bolts, hurling of axes, hammers, javelin, darts, etc. It also includes the hurling of rocks by giants, manticore tail spike throwing, and so on. It can occur simultaneously with magical device attacks, spell casting, or turning of undead. Magical device and spell attacks can negate the effects of or damage some missiles, i.e., arrows fired off simultaneously with the discharge of a fireball spell, or a javelin hurling into an ice storm, or a dwarven hammer tossed at an opponent struck by a fireball or lightning bolt. As referee, you will have to determine the final results according to circumstances. This is not difficult using the item saving throw table. Likewise, discharge of missiles into an existing melee is easily handled. It is permissible, of course, and the results might not be too incompatible with the desires of the discharging party. Assign probabilities to each participant in the melee or target group according to sheer numbers. In the case of participants of varying size, use half value for this, for size, S, normal value for size, M, and 1 1/2 value for size, L creatures, which are not too much larger than man-sized. Total the values for each group and ratio over one over the other. If side A has 4 man-sized participants, and size B has 3 smaller than man-sized participants, and 1 size L bugbear, the ratio is 4 to 3. Then, according to the directives of the missile discharge, determine hits by using the same ratio. If 7 missiles were loosed, 4 would have a chance to hit side A, 3 side B. In cases where the ratio does not match the number of missiles, convert it to a percentage chance. 1 to 7 equals 14% or 15%, depending on whether the missiles are coming from ahead of side A, 14%, or from behind, 15%. Thus, 4 to 7 equals 56% or 60% chance per missile that it will hit side A. The minor difference represents the fact that there will be considerable shifting and maneuvering during combat, which will tend to expose both opponents to fire on a near equal basis. Such missiles must then be assigned by situation or by random determination to target creatures, a 2-hit determination made, and damage assessed for those which do hit. Large missiles will be treated in the same fashion. This is so scary. I don't think I've ever used this rule system. I've always, for missile attacks into melee, it makes perfect sense to me. I've just never done it. I've always done the elf standing at the back sniping the ogre or the bugbear or the goblin is the only thing that they're going to hit, unless they miss, in which case then I say, well, there's a certain percentage chance that it's going to hit someone that's fighting near them. This makes it infinitely more dangerous to fire into melee. And again, it makes sense. You're maneuvering around, you're feinting, you're dodging, you're ducking, you're going to be moving. So it's just like, you fire an arrow at an object in the distance, it's not going to stay at that distance necessarily. If one opponent group is significantly larger than the other, accurate missiles, which have a small area of effect, can be directed at the larger opponent group with great hope of success. You may assign a minor chance of the missile striking a friend if you wish, but this rider, for instance, always allows archery hits to hit a giant or a similar creature engaged against a human or smaller opponent. That just makes perfect sense. Missiles from giants are approximately 1 foot in diameter, as are those from small catapults. Those from large catapults and trebuchets are approximately 2 feet in diameter. See also grenade-like missiles and special to-hit bonuses. Strength bonus considerations. The strength bonus for hitting and damage does not apply to missiles unless the character so entitled specifically takes steps to equip himself or herself with special weapons to take advantage of additional strength. This will result in the weapon having an additional chance to hit and do the additional damage as well. In no event will it apply the effective range for the character's weapon. Thus, the character will employ a heavier missile or a more powerful bow and heavier arrows or a larger sling missile to gain the advantage of strength. To do so, he or she must obtain the special weapon or weapons, and this is within the realm of your adjudication as DM as to where and how it will be obtained and how much cost will be involved. I've seen players hit players using similar rules. Arguments followed. Yeah. Well, this is something that I noticed as I started playing basic Dungeons & Dragons, then Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, then 2nd edition and 5th Age, and then ultimately 3rd edition, and so on. I experienced more arguing over the rules in 3rd edition, 3.5, than I ever did in basic or 1st edition. 2nd edition, people you generally trusted, the DM, and so you didn't, you just sort of did the rules. But in 1st edition, it always fell down, well, what does the DM say? That is what happens. No argument. In 3rd edition, it was nickel and diming with bonuses and different feats, and it was such a pain in the tuchus to do anything with certain players. Yeah, so arguments, that's fine. Complain all you want, but during gameplay, during the session, listen to the DM. Everyone will feel so much better about it. Special note regarding giant and machine missiles. When giants hurl boulders or any of the various siege machines, ballistae, catapults, etc., fire missiles, target characters do not gain dexterity bonus considerations to armor class when to-hit computations are made. Consider this as follows. Character A has an armor class rating of -2, but as a dexterity accounts for 2 of these factors, AC rating drops to 0 if a giant is hurling rocks at the character or if some machine is discharging missiles at him or her. Again, in my opinion, this makes perfect sense because of the size of these items. It's easier to step aside from an arrow shooting past you than it is to get out of the way of a boulder falling down on top of you. Missile fire cover and concealment adjustments. Adjust armor class for the target creature as follows if cover, hard substances which protect, or concealment, soft substances which screen, exist. Target has about, and the percentage of cover and concealment, and the armor class bonus that it gives you. This is really important to consider. It may be a little challenging during the course of an encounter because it generally means it's going to be like rifle, like modern warfare, where you're going to find cover and concealment in order to protect yourself instead of just running up and going toes with a monster. But it is important because being around a stone corner or behind a bush is going to give you a little bit of assistance in avoiding attacks versus, again, being at toes distance. 25% is cover or concealment to the knees or part of the left or right side of the body screened. It might also be a target which is seen for only 3/4 of a round. Men on a walled parapet will typically be 25% covered. 50% cover or concealment equals protection or screening to the waist. Half of one side of the body is being screened for only half of the round. Figures in thick brush will be at least 50% concealed. Men on a castle wall with I don't know how to say this word, embrasures and merlons will be at least 50% covered. Shuttered embrasures and narrow windows would provide 75% cover, while arrow slits offer 90% cover. For the effect of cover on magic, see spellcasting during melee, effective cover on spells and spell-like powers. Grenade-like missiles. Boulders and containers of acid, holy or unholy water, oil, and poison. Hurling various containers of liquid is a common tactic in dungeon adventures in particular. For game purposes, it is necessary to make certain assumptions regarding all such missiles. And we have a little chart here, so I'll show you that. The size, whether it's acid, holy or unholy water, oil or poison, and the size of the, pint. The effect, liquid contents, area of effect, splash, and damage from a direct hit. That's pretty cool. So flaming oil splashed on a creature will burn for 1 to 3 segments, causing 1 hit point of damage per segment. A direct hit with flaming oil causes 2 to 12 hit points of damage the first round, and 1 to 6 additional hit points of damage the second round, but then burns out. Range. The range of all such container missiles is 3 inches. Beyond 1 inch is medium, and beyond 2 inches is long. -2 and -5 to hit, respectively. Hits. When the die roll indicates the missile has hit, then it is necessary to roll again to see if the container shatters or not, using the blow, crushing column on the item saving throw matrix. Unless special procedures were taken to weaken the container, i.e. the container was specially scored, it is particularly fragile, etc. Damage occurs only if the container breaks, except with regard to oil, which must be alight, flaming, to cause damage. If oil has been specially prepared by insertion of a rag into the opening of the container or wrapped around the neck of the container and set fire prior to hurling, it will burst into flame when the container breaks upon target impact. Otherwise, a torch or other means of causing combustion must be brought into contact with the oil. Poison special is dependent upon whether or not the poison is a contact poison or if the container was hurled into the ingestive or respiratory orifice on the target creature. This is why it's always important to close your mouth when fighting, so no one hurls poison into it. In the latter case, breakage is not necessary if the container was unstopped. If stopping, check saving throw for breakage using the below normal column of the item saving throw matrix. Splash hits. All creatures within 3 feet of the impact and breaking point of the container missile must save versus poison or be splashed with the contents of the shattered container. Boulders. Boulders, for gaming purposes, are considered to be 1 foot in diameter for giants, 2 feet in diameter for siege engines. Range and damage specifications for siege engines are given in the appropriate section. See Monster Manual for giants' abilities. A dropped boulder, or any heavy weight, will do damage as follows. Each 14 pounds of weight will inflict 1 point of damage per foot of distance dropped between 10 feet and 60 feet. Distances above 60 feet are always treated as 60 feet. Alternatively, each 14 pounds of weight will inflict a flat 1 to 6 hit points of damage. Misses. If the 2-hit die roll indicates a miss, roll 1 d6 and 1 d8. The d6 indicates the distance in feet the missile was off target. If the target was large, simply compute the distance from the appropriate portion of the target, i.e. the character aims at a section of the floor which is 1 foot square, and miss distance is measured from the appropriate edge as explained below. The d8 distance the D8 indicates the direction in which the distance in feet of the miss is measured. All right, so we got this. This is applicable to me throwing anything. I'm just not the best. I'm good with a firearm, but when it's like a hurled missile, you know, like even baseballs, but footballs and stuff like that, I'm just not the best. That's all. And this tells you, based on the D8 roll, what direction around the intended target it goes. At short range, you may optionally use D4 to determine distance off target, but then use D8 for long-range distance determinations. If the missile is hurled at a plane, such as a wall, read long as high, short as low, measuring up the wall and then along the ceiling or down and then along the floor. Lighting oil. If a torch is used to attempt to light spilled oil, use above procedures for misses, as it still could land in a puddle of oil or oil-covered area. A lantern should be handled similarly, but also allowed a 2-foot diameter flaming oil area. Crossing flaming oil. Leaping over a puddle of flaming oil will cause no damage, unless the creature so doing is highly inflammable. Creatures with garments of cloth must save versus fire normal on the item saving throw matrix, or have their garments catch fire. Walking through or standing in flaming oil will cause the creature to take 1 to 6 hit points of damage per melee round. Holy or unholy water. All forms of undead, as well as creatures from the lower planes, demons, devils, night hags, nightmares, Nycadaemons, etc., are affected by holy water. Paladins, Lamassu, Shadu, Krynn, and similar creatures of good alignment, or from the upper planes, are affected by unholy water. The liquid causes the affected creature to suffer a burning as if struck by acid. The undead in non-material form cannot be harmed by holy water, i.e., until a ghost takes on material form, it is unaffected, and a vampire in gaseous form cannot be harmed by holy water. Spell casting during melee. These functions are fully detailed in Player's Handbook. Their commencement is dictated by initiative determination, as with other attack forms, but their cumulation is subject to the stated casting time. Both commencement and or completion can occur simultaneously with missile discharge, magical device attacks, and or turning undead. Being struck by something during casting will spoil the spell. Spellcasters will always insist that they are able to use their powers during combat melee. The DM must adjudicate the success of such use. Consider this. The somatic movement portions of a spell must be begun and completed without interruption in a clean, smooth motion. The spell as a whole must be continuous and uninterrupted from beginning to end. Once interrupted, for any reason whatsoever, the spell is spoiled and lost, just as if used. Spells cannot be cast while violently moving, such as running, dodging a blow, or even walking normally. They are interrupted by a successful hit, be it a blow, missile, or appropriate spell, not saved against or savable against. Thus, casting a spell requires that a figure be relatively motionless and concentrating on the effort during the entire course of uninterrupted casting. For example, a magic user casting a fireball must be in sight of the intended area of effect during the course of the spell, although an associate could be there to open a door intervening between the caster and target at an appropriate time, providing the timing was correct, of course. The caster cannot begin a spell, interrupt it just prior to completion, run to a different area, and then complete the spell. Interruption instantly cancels it. Unless a spell has no somatic components, the caster cannot be crouching, let alone prone, during casting. It can thus be understood that spell casting during a melee can be a tricky business, for a mere shove at any time can spoil the dweomer. Any spell can be attempted, but success is likely to be uncertain. Use the following procedure for spells cast during melee. 1. Spellcasters must note what spell they intend to cast at the beginning of each round prior to any knowledge of which side has initiative. Oh wow, okay, so even before you roll initiative, if a caster wants to cast a spell during that turn, they have to declare it, and then you roll initiative. Interesting. 2. Attacks directed at spellcasters will come on that segment of the round shown on the opponent's or on their own side's initiative dice, whatever is applicable. If the spellcaster side won the initiative with a roll of 5, the attack must come then, not on the opponent's losing roll of 4 or less. Thus, all such attacks will occur on the 1st through 6th segments of the round. 3. Intelligent monsters able to recognize the danger of spells will direct attacks against spellcasters if not engaged by other opponents, so as to be prevented from doing so. And that makes perfect sense, especially if you encounter this group and you see, before initiative even rolled, the casters start their, somatic movements and verbal chanting. I would definitely target that dude. Like, no, stop him, quick! 4. The spellcaster cannot use his or her dexterity bonus to avoid being hit during spell casting. Doing so interrupts the spell. 5. Any successful attack or non-saved against attack upon the spellcaster interrupts the spell. Now, I want to go back to 4 really quick because it says if the spellcaster, it's implying this, if the spellcaster uses their dexterity bonus, it means that they chose to stop the spell and dodge the attack, because it gives you the indication of doing so interrupts the spell. So they can use their dexterity bonus if they want to avoid the hit, but then they would, of course, lose the spell. Because spellcasting will be so difficult, most magic users and clerics will opt to use magical devices whenever possible in melee, if they are wise. Magical device attacks. These attacks are the spell-like discharge function of rods, staves, wands, and any similar items. These attacks can occur simultaneously with the discharge of missiles, spell casting, and or turning undead. The time of such discharge by any magical device is subject to initiative determination. See also combat procedure below. Effective cover on spells and spell-like powers. Hard cover will increase chances for saving throws as noted. Cover equal to 90% or better will also give the target creatures the benefit of no damage whatsoever if their appropriate saving throw is successful. Monster Charm Power. The magical charming power of creatures such as nixies and vampires is much more powerful than that of the simple charm person spell. While it will eventually wear off, until it does, the charmee is subject to mental commands by the charmer, unlike either the charm person or charm monster spell. This means that a monster charmed character does not need to speak the creature's language to understand commands from the monster which charmed it, although only basic emotions or simple commands can be mentally communicated to the charmee unless some mutual language is common to both the charmer and the charmee. While the charmed character is not an automaton, he or she will certainly hasten to carry out whatever instructions or commands are received from the charmer, except those which are obviously self-destructive. This relatively complete control of the charmee's mind enables the charmer to make the victim almost totally subject to its will, including giving up personal possessions, betraying associates, and so forth. Mental communication between charmer and charmee extends only to sight range of up to 60-foot radius, if not in sight range. Magic circles of protection, spells or specially drawn, will break the communication link and seemingly cause the charm to be broken, but unless magically dispelled or until the power of the magic wears off, the effect is again evident when the charmee is outside such protection. Hey Remy, thanks for joining live, man. Nerdgasm! Turning undead. As stated on the cleric's affecting undead table, this function may be attempted only once by each cleric. Of course, if there are 2, both may attempt the function, each trying once, etc. There is also an exceptional case where turning may be practiced more than once by each and every cleric concerned. This occurs in cases where multiple forms of creatures subject to turning are involved. If the cleric attempting the turning is successful against any or all types within the group of multiple forms of undead, that type or multiple types to the maximum number indicated by the die roll or otherwise indicated by the rules are turned, and on the next round the cleric so successful may attempt to turn other undead of the group. This process may continue as long as each successive attempt is successful and the cleric lives. Undead so turned from the group of multiple types are lowest hit dice types to highest hit dice types, i.e., first listed to last listed on the table. Any failure to turn undead disallows a further attempt by the same cleric. Turning can occur at the same time as missile discharge, magical device attacks, and or spell casting. It also is subject to initiative determination. If the undead are in a mixed group, for example, 1 vampire, 3 ghasts, and 8 ghouls, you run away! No. You may attempt to disallow any turning or other effect if the most powerful member, in the example above, the vampire, is not affected by the cleric. Naturally, this rule applies only to groups of mixed undead, where the lesser are following or serving the greater. Mindless undead, skeletons, and zombies cannot be considered. Otherwise, the cleric will affect undead according to the dice score, with the possibility of the lesser monsters being turned or otherwise affected, while greater ones are unaffected. Evil clerics. Anything below a result of T indicates that the undead are compelled to do some service. Treat this in the same way as an invisible stalker serving a magic user. The length of service so compelled is equal to 24 hours minus the minimum score the cleric needs to compel such services. Example: a 9th level evil cleric meets a lich. Hey, how you doing? Die! And scores a 20 on the die roll, so the lich will be neutral and not attack for 8 hours, 24 minus 16. Later, the same cleric encounters a vampire. This guy needs to move, and scores a 12. So the vampire will join the evil cleric and serve as a member of the cleric's group for up to 14 hours, 24 minus 10. A successful result of a member of the cleric's group for up to 14... Oh wait, I'm sorry, I just read that. A successful result of T indicates that the undead will remain neutral or serve for a full 24-hour period. A D result indicates cooperative service by the undead as long as the evil cleric renews his or her control every 6 hours. In any of the above cases, hostile acts against the undead or associated creature will certainly cause the cleric's effects to be totally broken and negated entirely. Hostile actions include entry into an area which the affected creatures have been commanded to guard, attempts to remove guarded items or treasures belonging to the affected creatures, attempts to prevent the affected creatures from carrying out commands, or actual attack by spell, weapon, or other forms which causes the affected creatures harm. NB. Any command creature will immediately be freed from clerical compulsion upon the unconsciousness, excepting normal sleep, or death of the cleric who successfully compelled them into service. This will result in the affected undead or other affected creatures or creature either leaving or attacking the cleric and his or her group according to the existing circumstances. Consider treatment and risk when arriving at the action the affected creature takes. Mindless undead will simply do nothing, losing all animation and direction. Counter-affecting. A cleric of opposite alignment may attempt to negate the effects of a cleric who has affected undead or other creatures. The table is consulted, and if the countering cleric is successful, the affected undead are freed of the effects of the first cleric's efforts. Of course, this counter will not restore any undead destroyed or damned by a good cleric. This counter may in turn be countered, etc. This may continue indefinitely until one or the other creatures have clerical effects countered. May continue indefinitely until one or the other cleric fails and is no longer eligible to affect undead at all. When affected creatures have clerical effects countered, they are powerless to take any action on the following round. Evil areas. You may wish to establish areas where evil has made special power bases, i.e., an evil shrine, temple, or whatever. Such areas must be limited, of course, the shrine to perhaps a 10-inch by 10-inch area, the temple to twice that area. Such areas will automatically reduce the chance of any cleric affecting undead or other creatures within their precincts by a previously stipulated factor, perhaps 1 or 2 in the shrine area, 3 or 4 in the temple area. This power can be destroyed only by desecration of the evil, i.e., breaking of the evil altar service, pouring of holy water upon the altar, blessing and prayers, and whatever other actions you, as DM, deem sufficient. Thus, in an area specifically consecrated to evil, undead and associated creatures from the lower planes are far more difficult to handle. The corollary to this is that on the lower planes themselves, good clerics are totally unable to affect the evil creatures who dwell upon them, while on the upper planes, an evil cleric should have no effect upon a paladin. Good areas are similar bases for power for such creatures, and evil clerics will have lesser chances of affecting paladins or similar good-aligned creatures. Whew, all right, I gotta take a sip of water, my goodness. Further actions. Close to striking range. This merely indicates that the party concerned is moving at a base speed to engage the opponent. The base speed is inches, indicating tens of feet in the dungeon or similar setting indoors, tens of yards outdoors. All normal activity and bonuses are permitted when doing so. This action is typically taken when the opponent is over 1 inch distant, but not a long distance away. Play goes to the next round after this, as melee is not possible, although other ability can, of course, take place, such as that detailed above. Charge. This action brings the charging party into combat on the charging round, but there are a number of considerations when it is taken. Movement rate outdoors. Movement bonus for charging in normal outdoor settings is 33 1/3% of base speed for bipedal creatures, 50% for quadrupeds, cf. TSR's swords and spells. Movement rate indoors. The indoor dungeon rate is greatly reduced due to the conditions. Therefore, all movement at the charge is double base speed, remembering that encumbered creatures are not allowed to charge. Note, the opponent must be within 10 feet distance at the termination of the charge in order for any blows to be struck during that round. Armor class of charging creatures. There is no dexterity bonus allowed for charging creatures. Creatures with no dexterity bonus become 1 armor class lower, i.e. easier to hit. Thus, an armor class 3 creature becomes armor class 4. There's no penalty to armor class 10 creatures for charging, however. Melee at end of charge. Initiative is not checked at the end of charge movement. The opponent with the longer weapon or reach attacks first. Charging creatures gain +2 on their 2-hit dice if they survive any non-charging or charging opponent attacks which occur first. Weapon length and first strike are detailed under strike blows. Only 1 charge can be made each turn. Thus, an interval of 9 rounds must take place before a second charge movement can be made. Set weapons against possible opponent charge. Setting weapons is a simple matter of bracing such piercing weapons as spears, spiked polearms, forks, glaives, etc., so as to have the butt of the shaft braced against an unyielding surface. The effect of such a weapon upon a charging or leaping, pouncing, falling, or otherwise onrushing opponent is to cause such opponent to impale itself and take double normal damage if a hit is so scored. Example. Character A sets her spear with its butt firmly braced upon the floor just as a giant toad hops at her, attacking. If the spear impales the creature, it will score double indicated damage, d8 times 2. Note that in this case, initiative is automatically given to the set spear, as it will obviously take effect prior to any attack routine of the toad, and that 2 dice are not rolled, but the result of d8 roll is multiplied by 2. Strike blows. As previously stated, initiative is the key factor as to which side strike blows first each melee round. This is modified by creatures with multiple attack routines, whether by natural or magical ability, such as haste. It is also modified by weapon length when one opponent is charging or otherwise closing precipitously into melee combat. Simultaneous initiative. When opponents in melee have tied for initiative blows, attack routines included occur simultaneously except when both opponents are using weapons. Each weapon has a speed factor, and in that case of otherwise simultaneous blows, the opponent with the weapon which has the lower speed factor will strike first. Thus, a blow from a fist occurs before a blow with a dagger, 1 to 2. A dagger before a short sword, 2 to 3. A short sword prior to a hammer, 3 to 4, and so on. Weapon speed factor. This number is indicative of the wieldiness of any particular weapon, how long it takes to ready the weapon against an opponent, or how long it takes to recover and move it in his attack mode. A pike, for example, is a 13, as it must be lowered, grasped, and then held or thrust firmly. Such a weapon is not usable in dungeon settings or anywhere else without masses of other pikes to support it. In the latter case, an opponent surviving the first attack from the bearer of the pike will likely be able to strike several times before recovery of a pole for a second thrust. This is further detailed below. A two-handed sword with a 10 speed factor likewise requires a lengthy readying time and recovering period after its attack due to its size and weight. When weapon speed factor is the determination of which opponent strikes first in a melee round, there is a chance that one opponent will be entitled to multiple attacks. Compare the score of the lower factored weapon with that of the higher. If the difference is at least twice the factor of the lower, or 5 or more factors in any case, the opponent with the lower factored weapon is entitled to 2 attacks before the opponent with a higher weapon factor is entitled to any attack whatsoever. If the difference is 10 or greater, the opponent with the lower factor weapon is entitled to 2 attacks before the opponent is allowed to attack, and 1 further attack at the same time the opponent with the higher speed factored weapon finally is allowed to attack. Note that such speed factor considerations are not applicable when either closing or charging to melee, but after an initial round of combat, or in cases where closing or charging was not necessary, the speed factor considerations are applicable. Hey T-Matt, thanks for joining live. This is the first edition crazy disorganized DM, which one needs to play the DragonLance Adventures as written. Yeah. It can get really complicated. Again, it just depends on the agreement that the DM is going to make with the players on how stickler they are for the rules and, you know, how they're going to work with the flow of natural play. Other weapon factor determinants. The speed factor of a weapon also determines when the weapon strikes during the course of the round with respect to opponents who are engaged in activity other than striking blows. Thus, suppose side A, which has achieved initiative action for the round, has a magic user engaged in casting a spell. Compare the speed factor of the weapon with the number of segments which the spell will require to cast to determine if the spell or the weapon will be cast or strike first. Subtracting the losing die roll on the initiative die roll from the weapon factor and treating negative results as positive. Wow. Example. A sword with a factor of 5, broad or long, is being used by an opponent of a magic user attempting to cast a fireball spell, 3-segment casting time. If the sword-wielding attacker was represented by a losing initiative die roll of 1, the spell will be cast prior to the sword's blow. A 2 will indicate that the spell and the blow are completed simultaneously. A 3 to 5 will indicate that the blow has a chance of striking if a successful 2-hit roll is made, before the spell is cast, arriving either as the spell is begun or during the first segment of its casting. Suppose instead that a dagger were being employed. It has a speed factor of only 2, so it will strike prior to spell completion if the initiative roll which lost was 1 to 4. The adjusted segment indicator being 1, 0, 1, 2, respectively, and simultaneously if the die score was a 5. If the weapon being employed was a two-handed sword, or any other weapon with a speed factor of 10, or 9 for that matter, there would be no chance for the reacting side to strike the spellcaster prior to completion of the fireball. Note that even though a spell takes but one segment to complete, this is 6 seconds, and during that period, a reacting attacker might be able to attack the magic user or other spellcaster prior to actual completion of the spell. If a combat is simultaneous, there is no modification of the weapon speed factor. Holy hell. All right, let's see. The Dungeon Dorks, thanks for joining live, man. Well, I only use weapon speed in relation to simultaneous initiatives so that you can determine who goes first. Otherwise, I just always default to initiative. It's just easier that way. Striking to subdue. This is effective against some monsters and other creatures of humanoid size and type, as indicated in the monster manual under dragons or herein. Such attacks use the flat butt, haft, pommel, or otherwise non-lethal parts of the weapon concerned but are otherwise the same as other attacks. Note that unless expressly stated otherwise, all subduing damage is 75% temporary, but 25% of such damage is actually damaging the creature being subdued. This means that if 40 hit points of subduing damage has been inflicted upon an opponent, the creature has actually suffered 10 hit points of real damage. The above, of course, does not apply to player characters. Grapple and hold. See non-lethal and weaponless combat procedures. Special to-hit bonuses. The following general rules will be assistance when you must adjudicate melee combat or missile fire. Opponent encumbered, held by one leg or off balance, etc. is at a +2. Opponent stunned, held by both legs, slowed or partially bound, etc. is at a +4. Opponent magically asleep, held, paralyzed, or totally immobile is automatic. CF melee, magically sleeping or held opponents. Yeah, that's instant death, because you can just put your sword right through their head. Applying bonuses to the chance of the opponent being struck. The opponents will gain no dexterity bonus, of course. In total immobilized and powerless situations, the opponent can be fully trussed, slain, or whatever in one round, so no bonus need be given. See also melee, flank, and rear attacks. This is a tactic I used to use in Champions of Krynn, the old video game for IBM DOS. It's actually available now on GOG if you guys ever want to play it. But I would use my magic user to cast Hold Person on a Draconian, for example, and then I would just have anyone strike that creature and they just instantly die. Like, it doesn't matter what you're using because they can't defend at all, and you can just stick your hoopak, for example, right through their eye if you're right next to them. Morale. Morale checks are used to determine the amount of will to fight in non-leader NPCs and can be applied both to henchmen and hirelings of character types and groups of intelligent opponent monsters. See also loyalty of henchmen and hirelings, obedience, and morale. Base unmodified morale score is 50%. Morale, and then we have a little chart here. Let me show you here. So morale checks made when faced by obvious superior force. You need to check each round. 25% of party eliminator slain, check at 5%, and then it goes on from there. So the asterisk is such as in melee, when one force is hitting twice as often as the other, and 2 asterisk is or individual taking this much personal wound damage. And then there's actually more morale modifiers here at the top right. Morale scores. Henchmen or associated creatures. For each creature, take the base morale, loyalty score, and cast percentile dice. Adjust the score for penalties and bonuses, and if the adjusted score is equal to or less than the loyalty score, morale is good. If the number exceeds the loyalty score, the creature will react according to the morale failure table below. Monsters Intelligent. Each monster has a base morale of 50% plus 5% per hit die above 1, 1% per hit point above any hit die. If a morale check is required, scoring and reaction are as stated above for henchmen et al. Morale failure. And we can see, based on the percentage of failure, what they'll do, from falling back to surrendering. The difference between the maximum score needed to retain morale and the number actually rolled as adjusted is the percent of morale failure. Pursuit and evasion of pursuit. There are two cases of pursuit and evasion of pursuit. The first is in underground situations, and the second is in outdoor situations. There are various special circumstances which pertain to each case, so each will be dealt with separately. Pursuit and evasion in underground settings. When player characters with attendant hirelings and or henchmen, if any, elect to retreat or flee from an encounter with a monster or monsters, a possible pursuit situation arises. Whether or not pursuit will actually take place is dependent upon the following. 1. If the matrix or key states that the monsters in question will pursue, or if the monster manual so states, then pursuit will certainly occur. 2. If the monster or monsters encountered are semi-intelligent or under, hungry, angry, aggressive, and or trained to do so, then pursuit will be 80% likely to occur, D10, 1 through 8. 3. If the monster or monsters encountered are of low intelligence, but otherwise suit the qualifications of 2 above, then pursuit will occur with the following probabilities. A. If the party outnumbers the potential pursuers, then pursuit is 20% likely. B. If the party is about as numerous as the potential pursuers, then pursuit is 40% likely. C. If the party is outnumbered by the potential pursuers, then pursuit is 80% likely. D. If condition C exists, and furthermore the potential pursuers conceive of themselves as greatly superior to the party, then pursuit is 100% certain. Pursuit will have 3 separate cases. 1. The pursued are faster than the pursuer. Unless there are extenuating circumstances, such as a range NPC or an invisible stalker or a slithering tracker pursuing, then pursuit will end as soon as any one of the following conditions is met. A. The pursued are in sight, but over 100 foot distant, or B. The pursued are out of sight and were over 50% distant when they so left the perception of the pursuers, or C. Pursuit has continued over 5 rounds and the pursuer has not gained perceptibly upon the pursued. My goodness. 2. The pursued are of equal speed to the pursuers. As in case 1 above, pursuit will end as soon as any one of the following conditions are met. A. The pursued are in sight but over 100 foot distant, or B. The pursued are out of sight and were over 80 foot distant when they left the perception of the pursuers, or C. Pursuit has continued over 1 turn and the pursuer has not gained perceptibly upon the pursued. My goodness. 3. The pursuer is faster than the pursued. The pursuit will be broken off only if one of the following occurs. A. The pursued are out of sight and were over 200 feet distant when they left the perception of the pursuers, or B. The pursuer is unable to continue due to reasons of physical endurance. Modifiers to pursuit. There are several circumstances which will affect the pursuer. These are 1. Barriers. Physical or magical barriers will slow or halt pursuit, i.e. a locked portal, a broken bridge, a wall of fire, etc. 2. Distractions. Actual or magical distractions will be from 10% to 100% likely to cause pursuit to falter or cease altogether. For example, a dancing lights spell moving away from a fleeing party, which has extinguished its light sources, might distract pursuers just as a phantasmal force of a strong helper joining the pursued might cause the pursuers to cease pursuit. Similarly, if the pursued passed through or near some other creatures which would be hostile to the pursuing party, or at least not friendly to the pursuers, then it is quite possible that the creatures passed through the pursuers would become embroiled. NB. The likelihood of any distraction being successful is a matter of individual adjudication by the DM, using advanced Dungeons & Dragons principles and common sense as they apply to the particular circumstances prevailing. There are also two subclasses here. A. Food. Food, including rations and or wine, will be from 10% to 100 likely to distract pursuers of low intelligence or below, providing that food and wine is what they find palatable. Roll a d10 to find the probability, unless you have a note as to how hungry or food-oriented the creatures are. Add 10% to the result for every point of intelligence below 5, and give a 100% probability for non-intelligent creatures pursuing. If probability is under 100%, roll the d10 a second time, and if the result is equal to or less than the probability determined, then the pursuers break off pursuit for 1 round while the food and wine is consumed. Weird. B. Treasure. Treasure, including precious metals, gems, jewelry, rare stuffs such as ivory or spices, variable items, and or magic, will be 10% to 100% likely to cause pursuers of low or greater intelligence to be distracted. Pursuers of lower intelligence will have an additional 10% per 10 items, regardless of actual value, dropped, i.e. 20 copper pieces have a 20% additional probability of causing a distraction. The value of items dropped, known or presumed or potential, will likewise cause pursuers an average of greater intelligence to be more likely to be distracted. For each 100 gold piece value or potential value, add 10% to base probability. Roll the d10 a second time to see if the potential and actual interest are the same, just as is done with food. Oh my gosh. Just as is done when food is used as a possible distraction. Note, however, that very small items of value, notably gems and the like, would have a chance of going completely unnoticed in the heat of pursuit. If success occurs, the pursuer will be distracted for 1 round or the length of time necessary to gather up the treasure, whichever is the greater. Whoa. 3. Multiple choice. It will most often come to pass that a pursued take a route which enables them to cause the pursuers to have to make decisions as to which direction the pursued took in their flight. We've all seen this in every Scooby-Doo episode ever. Thus, at a branching passage, when there are 3 possible ways which could have been taken, there's a basic 2 in 3 chance that the pursuers will take the wrong passage. Likewise, if there is a door and a passage, there is a 1 in 2 chance of wrong choice. This base chance assumes that the pursuer cannot see the pursued when the choice is made, that sound does not reveal the direction of flight, that smell does not reveal direction of flight, nor do any other visual, audio, or olfactory cues point to the escape path. As DM, you will have to adjudicate such situations as they arise. The following guidelines might prove helpful. Light. Straight line of sight is near infinite. Any corner cuts distance to 60 feet. Noise. Characters in metal armor can be heard for 90 feet. Hard boots can be heard at 60 feet. Relative quiet movement can be heard at 30 feet. Odors. Normal scent can be detected by creatures hunting or tracked by scent for several hours, even in a dungeon setting. Scent can be masked with various things: mustard powder, oil of citronella, crushed stinging nettle, etc. We've got an awesome illustration here. Turn around! He's coming! God, I love that image. That's great. Water dripping off the skull's head. Well, off the skull. Building indoors. This is why it's important to wash, people. Make sure you shower. Building indoors. Treat these settings the same as one underground as applicable. Procedure for determination of evasion underground. If it is discovered that a pursuit situation exists, and the player party elects to evade rather than confront pursuers, then record the relative speed of pursued and pursuer. Move the pursued party as many as tens of feet as their slowest member is able to travel, and likewise move the pursuing party as many as tens of feet as its fastest member can travel, noting positions of slower members, if any, as well. This movement is accomplished on the map, of course. 3 such movement phases are, for game purposes, equal to 1 round. At the end of any movement portion, where any number of the pursued party is within 10 feet or less of any number of the pursuing party, confrontation must take place between the concerned parties, members of the party. At this point, the remainder, if any, of the pursued party may elect to stop flight or continue evasion attempts as they wish. Also, at the end of each movement portion, it is necessary to check the 3rd separate pursuit cases and any pursuit modifiers to see if the pursued party has success in evading the pursuers. Keep track not only of the route of flight, but also the amount of game time so spent, as some pursuit will automatically cease after a set period without confrontation. Mapping during flight. No mapping is ever possible. Give no distance measures in moving the pursued. Give no compass directions either. Wow. All right. Pursuit and evasion in outdoor settings. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure I want to... I'm burned out here. Let's see. Yeah, we'll keep going until I hit melee. We're almost here. Pursuit in the outdoors is generally similar to that in settings underground or indoors. The 3 general rules of likelihood of pursuit apply. However, pursuit will certainly continue until evasion is successfully accomplished. In outdoor settings, evasion is accomplished in a different manner, the variables being the relative speed of movement and size of the parties concerned and the types of terrain over which pursuit takes place. Available light is also a factor. So we have a bunch of modifiers that we can show here. Base chance of evading pursuit outdoors is 80%, and then all of the movement speed adjustments, terrain adjustments, size of party involved adjustments, and available light adjustments. So yeah, it can get detailed. Procedure for determination of evasion outdoors. Upon encountering creatures from which the player party flees in order to evade, determine if a condition of surprise exists. If the player party has surprised the creature encountered, evasion is automatic. If no surprise exists, then follow the procedure below. If the party encountering the creature is surprised, then no evasion is possible and confrontation is unavoidable. Find the chance for evasion by adjusting the base chance according to variables. The pursued party rolls percentile dice, and if the number generated is less than or equal to the adjusted base chance of evasion, then they have had immediate success at eluding the pursuers. Otherwise, pursuit continues unless the pursuers are faster than the pursued and can close within 1 hour, in which case confrontation must take place. Continuing pursuit requires an evasion check every game hour. After the initial check, each game hour, another must be made just as is initially done. When the added stipulation that any result of 0% or less indicates immediate confrontation and no further chance of evasion. Special note regarding fatigue. No rules for exhaustion and fatigue are given here because of the tremendous number of variables, including the stamina of the characters and creatures involved. Thus, characters mounted on horses have gradually slower movement, but this is not a factor unless pursuing creatures tire more or less rapidly than do the mounts. You must judge these factors in a case of continuing pursuit. Fatigue merely slows movement and reduces combat effectiveness. Exhaustion will require generally a day of complete rest to restore the exhausted creatures. Always bear in mind that humans inured to continuous running, for example, can do so for hours without noticeable fatigue, i.e., those such as Apache Indians, Zulu warriors, etc. Do not base your judgment on the typical modern specimen. Yeah, so whether or not you can run for an hour has no bearing on whether a hero can run for an hour. And that is the end of that section. The next section is melee. So we will stop here, and next time we will pick up on melee. Whew, that is a lot. What are you guys talking about in here? You're talking about the Dragons of Despair. You got the original DragonLance modules. I actually want to run those really, really bad, but I need confirmed players into, in order to play them. And it does not have to be the Heroes of the Lands. I don't mind adjusting play. The original modules actually had a lot of optional, it didn't follow the book exactly. For example, Verminar doesn't die in Pax Tharkaz. You may defeat him, but he does show up later. But there's also, it's not Everman and it's not closing the portal that are the only ways to beat Takesis in the end. There are a lot of different variables, including like a resurrected Huma. So it gets really kind of interesting. Yeah, I like first edition because it can be as complex or as simplistic as the DM and group agree upon, So it doesn't have to be insane, but it can be all right. All right, so next time we're going to get into melee, where we're talking about, facing off on different directions for combat and stuff like that, and how it, affects your armor class as well. So that can be a little bit complicated. There's going to be some illustrations and stuff, but that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this Gaming Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide reading. What do you think of combat in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons? Is it too complicated? Are you used to something much simpler, like the Saga role-playing system of just playing cards, or maybe even like the World of Darkness from White Wolf, where it's more role-playing based, less, techie and specifics? Or do you like it? Do you get off on the technical aspect of it? That's okay too. Let me know in the comments. If you have any questions or comments about this channel, you can always email me at info@dlsaga.com or just comment below. I'm able to create these weekly videos because of your attention and support. If you're not already a member of this YouTube channel, I'd like to invite you to consider becoming one. And if you'd like to pick up any edition of DragonLance Gaming materials, feel free to use my affiliate link in the description below. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga, and thank you for joining me in the celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Slán Javar.